Hi, everyone, and welcome to another weekly edition of Aging in Action. Today with us, we have a wonderful guest, Laura Paris. She is with a family law expert with Shulman Partners LLP in Toronto. And we're here to discuss today coupling later in life. And it's probably got a little bit of an interesting take on it, but welcome to the show, Laura. Thank you so much for coming to spend some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Laura.
So Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself, the firm, and if you wouldn't mind, what the article I recently read, Coupling Later in Life, kind of had a little bit of a twist and can have a different takeaway. So what is your take on coupling later in life?
Right, for sure. So so like you said, my name is Laura Paris. I practice family law. I've been practicing exclusively in family law since my call to the bar in 2016. So I've been practicing for just over 6 years. I have been working with Shulman for the entirety of my career, and Shulman also is strictly focused on family law. We are one of the biggest family law firms in Ontario and looking to continue to grow. And where our firm tries to find excellence and is in terms of kind of taking a more human approach to the practice of family law. We recognize that family law is a very, very personal issue. Your lawyers end up knowing some of the most intimate details of your life that others may not be aware of. And we try to be mindful with every file that crosses our path to understand that there are a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of personal issues, and understanding that sometimes the law doesn't always perfectly provide us with the solutions that our clients need, and focusing on finding those creative solutions that will meet our clients' needs and still protect them. So this topic that we're discussing today, I think, perfectly falls in line with that. When you are coupling later in life and finding kind of these late life loves, the issues that you are dealing with are a lot different than those that you see when you are kind of just starting out in life, especially when you're dealing with couples that are, coming into second marriages, for example, or second long-term relationships, and maybe past the age of retirement, where they're no longer working, they're earning, their income is solely through what they earned in their pension, etc. So a lot of unique issues that couples need to be aware of and address, should they be pursuing these long-term relationships later in life.
Go ahead, Gwen. Go ahead.
Oftentimes you've already had maybe kids on both parties, both people have had children, and then so all of a sudden you're becoming a couple, and how those adult children look at things. They're wondering where their money is going because that's what they're looking. They actually believe that's their money. It's no, and it's I see it time and time again. It's almost like they're hovering around, their parent, wondering when are they going to die and what happens now. You brought somebody into the equation here that wasn't there before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the kind of more unique issues that we deal with. And mind you, it's not to say that family members aren't involved earlier on in life too. I think as well, we see when people are looking, to get into a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement earlier on in life, it's the parents that are more invested, maybe because they are giving a sizable down payment for a home, or, whatever it is to kind of kickstart the life. On the flip side, when you're dealing with coupling later in life, it really is the adult children that end up kind of being the wild card, that end up complicating things, and really it's more so for their sake, in a lot of circumstances, that these contracts make sense, because essentially what these spouses are trying to do is make sure that whatever they have left is going to be protected for the sake of their children. And this is where, things do, like I said, get a little bit more complicated and difficult, because you're not only dealing with two spouses, in terms of what they're comfortable with, but you also have, kind of the peanut gallery, coming from the adult children, because they believe that money is theirs and they have a stake in it, and as such should be involved in the conversation as to how these assets are going to be arranged and protected, from a new spouse entering their parents' life.
So Laura, let's say hypothetically, I'm in a new relationship and I'm in a demographic and kind of seasoned a little bit in the world. So you're getting into your 60s and 70s and all of a sudden you find that new love of your life. What are some of the topics or discussions that would be something you would think would be essential to have with that new partner?
So I think first and foremost, you want to determine what are your living arrangements going to look like. I think what's developed over the last few years is the definition of cohabitation. A lot of people are of the belief, which is not necessarily incorrect, that cohabitating means that you're living in the same house continuously for a certain period of time. And under the Family Law Act, in order to be considered in a common law relationship, you need to be cohabitating for a period of 3 years or more. Now, it is a bit of a misconception that you need to be living under the same roof in order to be cohabitating. Cohabitating can also be determined just based on having regular trends with a spouse. So, for example, we both have our own households, but on the weekends we spend our time at one party's house, or we keep our separate residence during the winter, but in the summer we go to the one party's summer cottage. Things like that, and just having kind of consistency in a living arrangement, even if you're not necessarily always living under the same roof, can still be considered cohabitation. So I think part of the first conversation you want to have is having an understanding of where are we living. Are we living together? Is there going to be any sort of consistency in terms of our living arrangement, in order to understand is there going to be some sort of, if you don't intend on getting married, may I still be opening myself up to potential family law issues in the event of a breakdown of this relationship as a result of our living arrangements? So I would say that's probably the first thing that you want to understand. And also, obviously, if you plan on getting married, that would be another conversation, because the law is different as it pertains to married couples versus common law couples. If the intention is to live together, which I think most people do, or at least have some sort of consistency in their living arrangements, then you want to have an understanding of what sort of interest would you be willing to give to this individual as it relates to the home, or is there any intention to share any interest? Because again, once you have this spousal designation, now all of a sudden property issues are relevant and live, and you want to make sure that if there's certain assets that you have that you do not want the other individual to be able to share in, that you do have a contract that sets that out consistently for you. And within the context of that, you also want to talk about sharing of expenses, pension, your retirement income, in the event there's any sort of support claim that can come up. But I would say, for the most part, what you very much want to be mindful of is, what do I have now? What am I willing to share? And what do we want to do together as a couple, and what is that going to look like?
When you say the word contract, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, prenup, very similar in that component, where I'm sitting down with somebody in a third party and saying, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the relationship. This is what I have. And like you just mentioned, what am I willing to share, or what am I able to, right? Because if you're a widow, as an example, and you may have received an inheritance, on a passing, or there was a life insurance policy, as an example, and then that information, or those savings may want to go investments to your children, right, from that relationship. And then, so when you say the word contract, is that very similar, like that, just so that the content is there for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah,
like a prenup.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd be referring to. So actually, in Canada, we don't term these contracts prenups. We call them marriage contracts, or a cohabitation agreement. So it depends on what type of relationship you're in. If you don't intend to get married, then the name of the contract would be a cohabitation agreement, and that would apply to common law spouses. And if you do intend on getting married, then it would be deemed a marriage contract. So that's exactly, and which is exactly akin to a prenuptial agreement.
my wheels are turning now. I'm like, I had never, I had never thought of it, and I'd never taken into consideration. And I find that, and as we were talking just about previous to the recording, was there are many relationships I'm seeing today changing. Friends, family, ending relationships. They've been when throughout the pandemic, life has changed and the relationships are coming to a halt or hitting a barrier, and things are kind of changing. And I think this is kind of interesting to have that conversation as to how do you move forward in the next relationship, whatever that might look like. So I guess best advice would be reach out to someone within that field of practice to make sure you get your facts correct.
I always say, it's good to have the knowledge. You may decide that it's not something that you want to pursue, and once you get the information, but it's important to have the information because there's so many misconceptions as it relates to family law issues, and being able to just get some clarity on that and not just act off of something that you read off of Google or something that a friend told you, because the reality is, again, like, family law is a very intricate area of the law. Each case turns on its own specific set of facts, and there is a lot of misinformation with when it comes to family law. One big thing that I hear a lot from people is being surprised about having to share their pension with their spouse, and the underlying, I guess, thought behind that is, this is for my retirement. Like, I work, I contribute to this because it's intended to carry me through my retirement. And, while I can understand where that sentiment comes from, your pension is an asset just like any other asset. It doesn't get special treatment, and it is divisible. And that's one of many misconceptions that people have as it pertains to family law issues. So again, even if if ultimately you choose not to go down that path and have a contract drafted, just having that information, knowing what potential assets or vulnerabilities, assets are vulnerable to things, or other vulnerabilities you may have, for example, from a support perspective, or something like that. The other thing is, I think that there's a very common or a stigma that is attached to these prenuptial agreements or marriage contracts. And the way that I like to discuss it with my clients is to look at it as an insurance policy. We don't get car insurance or house insurance because we want to get into a car accident or because we want something to happen to our home. We do it as just in case. It's an insurance policy. And I look at these types of contracts in the exact same way. It's just an insurance policy, just so you have some clarity in the event there is a breakdown of the relationship. You know exactly how things are going to get dealt with and where things are going. And I think, especially when we're dealing with couples, parties coupling later in life, you also have to be concerned about estate issues and how this could play into your estate. I mean, at the end of the day, you can pass away and you can kind of leave your troubles behind, but you're also leaving those troubles potentially to your family. So having clarity on those things before, entering into these relationships, and having these contracts that detail this is a good move. That's just going to save everybody. It costs a little bit at the forefront, but it will save you a lot of time, money, energy, and headaches in the future.
So in the absence of one of those contracts, say a couple, they got together a couple of years ago and now, but things are changing and they're struggling. Is there mediation to help people or to work things out when they haven't put anything in writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always, as long as people are on the same page, there's always ways to work things out without having to engage the court or even follow the law. I mean, common thing that I say to clients is that there's what makes sense under the law and there's what makes sense for you and your family. And if you have some sort of idea in your mind that you both agree to with respect to how you want to see your separation, pan out, that's great. And there are tons of tools, including mediation, and lawyers as well. I mean, we're not just here to argue in court. We're here also to negotiate on your behalf and find those solutions and come again, help you come to these creative solutions that makes sense for you and your family. And I think that, even dealing with separations later in life, the way that you look at it is a lot different as well. I find that a lot of clients and a lot of couples that I deal with that are past the stage of retirement, they're not at a point that they want to divide all of their assets. A lot of them actually choose to keep things intact, because financially it makes sense for them, because they've gone so long in their life planning that this is what my retirement's going to look like, and building this asset base that makes sense for the two of them, having one household together. So when you're dividing it all, it doesn't pan out in the same way. And some people do make the choice to, keep some investments together, keep, maybe continue to maintain certain properties together because it makes financial sense for them. Whereas the law would tell you to, divide, split, equalize, and move forward. So there's always these opportunities if the only thing that it takes is two willing and compromised minds that are willing to work together and find that solution.
I recently heard a term, and I had never heard it up until I think yesterday, gray marriage. And so can you just explain what that term is a little bit behind
Yeah.
just gray marriage of like, okay, what is that?
Yeah, of course. So gray marriages are essentially what we're calling couples that are getting into long-term relationships or choosing to be married, past the age of retirement. So again, we've termed this because it is unique, in terms of the types of issues that you're dealing with at that time. So that's kind of going back again to looking at the differences between the issues that you may be interested in at when you're getting into relationships kind of at the beginning of your adulthood versus at more so closer to, after the age of retirement, after you've lived your life, after you've had children. So the way that we approach kind of these gray marriages and the conversations and the topics that we discuss with clients that are embarking on these gray marriages are a lot different than those that we have with again couples that are getting married kind of when they're kicking off their adulthood.
I would think that the full transparency also, right, would be important with your children, your family. I would hope or think that most individuals, if they are moving on in relationships, maybe widowed, divorce, whatever it may be, separation, and that they're going into that second relationship, they're actually having that conversation with their children to say, hey, just letting you know that this is what's happening. I'm working with an individual to build a contract. This is, how it's going to impact you or not. Are you seeing right now, just through your lens, an intake of more individuals coming to the firm and saying, hey, I'm in a new relationship and I'm just, want to make sure that all my affairs are in order properly?
Absolutely. I will certainly say that it seems like in the last, at least 5 years, a lot more people are having these conversations about getting into these marriage contracts or cohabitation agreements. I would say, just comparatively in terms of looking at kind of the amount of contracts these types of contracts that I was doing earlier on in my career compared to today have, doubled or tripled. And again, I think, it's across the board, not only when we're talking about coupling later in life, but also just because people are getting married later in life, even in the first instance. And, a lot of people, when they're entering into a marriage, already have established careers, already own property, or have significant savings, or have, again, like family money that is helping them or has assisted them in kickstarting their lives. So this conversation has become a lot more relevant, and a lot more people, again, whether or not they ultimately choose to proceed forward with an agreement, a lot more people are curious and asking the right questions to make sure that they at least again have the knowledge, and can organize their affairs in a way to to protect themselves.
You find too, ageism is out there, right? They treat seniors as if all of a sudden they can't make these decisions on their own, and I get, the family starts interjecting their opinions, and their opinion matters more than the seniors' thoughts and desires. And just because you turn a certain age doesn't mean that you no longer have any emotions or feelings And I mean, that's why you get together with somebody new, right? Whether you marry or you cohabit. And I just feel like sometimes the adult children treat the parent as a child, actually, that they can't make these decisions anymore.
100%. And I think, my instinct says like butt out, like, if your family, if you're, if your parents are, I know for myself, my parents are separated. Any recoupling that they do, I'm happy for them. I'm not thinking of it in the context of, well, now you're in another marriage. Now there's another person that has a stake at my inheritance, and looking at it in that way. And I think that, it would be, it may be a bit idealistic, but we would hope that, the kids are looking at this saying, my mom or dad is happy. And I am more content with seeing them live out the rest of their years in a happy and healthy relationship versus being concerned about what that means for me financially at the end of the road. And I mean, obviously, we're not talking about situations where there is somebody who perhaps is not well intended in a relationship, and you see that your parent is being taken advantage of or something like that. I mean, of course you're gonna stand up for your parents, but I think there is a little bit of greed that you see coming from adult children that do complicate these types of agreements, and could even result in interfering with the relationship itself. And really, again, I think maybe a bit idealistic, but I think the focus for adult children more than anything should be ensuring that their parent has a chance to live the best rest of their life that they have, because whatever money they have, they worked hard for, and they deserve to enjoy it as they go on with their life.
Well, there's lots of family dynamics that comes into it, right? Lots of emotions from 50 years ago are still rearing their ugly head at the, something that happened. And when parents, when they've split up and now there's somebody new, you're still that little kid thinking, oh, I don't want that person in my life, right? There's a lot going on in the background with families.
And I think sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's absolutely not a simple thing or something that we can just paint with one brush and say you should deal with it in this way, or you should deal with it in that way. There's a lot of emotions involved, and this is the thing, and this is the tough part about family law. It's the interplay of emotions, and I think that it's hard enough for us, as family lawyers, or for couples to, find a common ground amongst themselves. So when you start adding other individuals into the mix and other opinions into the mix, it just makes things that much more difficult.
Absolutely. Laura, we're coming down to that last little bit of our taping for today's episode. Is there any last words that you wanted to share before we have to come to a close today?
Yeah, I think that the main thing that I would say, and kind of to reiterate back to some of my comments earlier, is get the information. It doesn't hurt to just have an understanding of what the law is and how it may impact you, especially when you are coupling later in life. You have a lot that you've worked hard for to build yourself to the place that you are today. And whether or not, again, you choose to ultimately have an agreement drafted, get the information so at least you have an understanding of what you're walking into, what potential vulnerabilities exist, and what potential claims could be made against you in the event of a breakdown of the relationship.
Thanks, Laura. Great ending words of wisdom for sure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Aging in Action. We're definitely going to share all of Laura's information, firm, and any other information that needs to be shared on our website, our social media, Aging in Action, and we will hopefully see you again next week. Thanks, Laura. It's been an interesting topic, I actually have to say. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thanks.